The year was 1998. Paris was bustling with its usual charm, the city of lights glowing with an air of sophistication and mystery. Robert Bourgi, a prominent French-Lebanese lawyer, waited anxiously in a luxurious Parisian apartment. The opulence of the room did little to calm his nerves. He was not alone. Roland Dumas, the former French foreign minister, was also present. The two men exchanged tense glances, both aware of the gravity of the situation, the source of their anticipation. A visit from Omar Bongo, the president of Gabon. Bongo's presence was always significant, often signaling important transactions. Bongo was a regular visitor to Paris. His trips were not just for leisure, they were deeply intertwined with political and financial dealings. He was known for his lavish spending habits and his close ties to the French political elite. His extravagant lifestyle was a topic of much discussion and speculation. On this particular occasion, Bongo was expected to arrive with a special delivery suitcases filled with cash. The anticipation in the room was palpable. This money, according to Bourgi, was destined for the coffers of the French political establishment. It was a well-orchestrated operation, one that had been repeated many times before. It was an open secret, whispered in the corridors of power, that African leaders like Bongo helped finance French political campaigns. These whispers carried the weight of truth. In return, France turned a blind eye to corruption and human rights abuses in its former colonies. This unspoken agreement allowed both parties to benefit while maintaining a facade of propriety. This system of patronage and kickbacks, known as Françafrique, had been in place for decades. It was a deeply entrenched network that operated with impunity. It was a system that benefited a select few at the expense of millions of ordinary Africans. The disparity between the elite and the common people was stark and heartbreaking, and Robert Bourgi, the man waiting anxiously for Bongo's arrival, was one of its key architects. His role in this intricate web of power and money was crucial, and he knew it. Robert Bourgi, born in Senegal to Lebanese parents, was a man who moved comfortably between the worlds of French politics and African strongmen. His unique background and upbringing allowed him to navigate these complex environments with ease and finesse. He was a lawyer by profession, but his true calling was as a fixer, a discreet intermediary who could make problems disappear and open doors to power. His legal expertise was merely a tool in his arsenal, enabling him to maneuver through legal and political landscapes with remarkable skill. Bourgi was a close confidant of several African leaders, including Omar Bongo of Gabon, with whom he shared a particularly strong bond. Their relationship was built on mutual trust and a shared vision for their respective countries. Denis Sassou Nguesso of Congo-Brazzaville also relied heavily on Bourgi's counsel. Bourgi's advice was instrumental in shaping Nguesso's political strategies and decisions, and Blaise Compaoré of Burkina Faso. Compaoré valued Bourgi's insights and often sought his guidance on matters of state and international relations. He served as an advisor, a strategist, and, as he himself admitted, a conduit for the flow of money from African treasuries to French political campaigns. This role made him a key player in the financial and political nexus between Africa and France. Bourgi's influence in Franco-African circles was undeniable. His ability to connect and influence leaders on both continents made him an indispensable figure in the political landscape. He was a successor to Jacques Foccart, the shadowy figure who had masterminded France's post-colonial policy in Africa. Bourgi carried on Foccart's legacy, ensuring that France maintained its influence in its former colonies. Like Foccart, Bourgi operated in the shadows, wielding immense power without ever holding an official position. His behind-the-scenes influence was felt in many significant political decisions and events, making him a pivotal yet enigmatic figure in modern history. To understand the role of figures like Robert Bourgi, one must delve into the murky and intricate history of Françafrique, a term that has come to symbolize a web of political and economic entanglements. This term, coined in the 1960s, encapsulates the complex and often corrupt relationship between France and its former colonies in Africa. It represents a blend of influence, control, and exploitation that has persisted for decades. Following their independence, many African nations remained economically and militarily dependent on France. This dependency was not merely incidental, but was actively cultivated by both French and African leaders. This dependence created fertile ground for a system of patronage and exploitation. French officials and businessmen found ways to maintain their influence through a network of personal relationships and financial incentives. French companies secured lucrative contracts in their former colonies, often with the help of generous bribes to African officials. These deals were highly profitable for the French, while often detrimental to the local populations. In return, these officials received political and military support from Paris, ensuring their grip on power. This support often came in the form of military aid, political backing, and economic assistance. Françafrique was a system that benefited a select few: French politicians, businessmen, and African dictators, at the expense of the vast majority of Africans. The ordinary citizens, meanwhile, faced poverty, instability, and a lack of true sovereignty. The flow of money from Africa to France, often in the form of suitcases stuffed with cash, was an open secret in the corridors of power. This financial support, according to Bourgi and other insiders, dated back to the aftermath of World War II. African leaders, eager to maintain their ties with the former colonial power, saw these contributions as a way to secure French support and influence. French political parties, for their part, readily accepted these funds, using them to finance election campaigns and line the pockets of party officials. This system of hidden financing, shrouded in secrecy and denials, continued for decades, undermining democratic principles in both France and Africa. Section 5. Funding Chirac's ambitions. Robert Bourgi's most explosive revelations concerned his role in allegedly facilitating cash deliveries for Jacques Chirac's presidential campaigns in 1995 and 2002. According to Bourgi, millions of francs were channeled from African leaders to Chirac's campaign coffers. These funds, he claimed, were often hand-delivered in suitcases during discreet meetings in Paris. While Chirac denied these allegations, Bourgi's claims sent shockwaves through the French political establishment. The idea that a French president could have been elected with the help of illicit funds from African dictators was deeply unsettling. Section 6. Cash in djembe drums. One particularly memorable incident described by Bourgi involved a cash delivery from Blaise Compaoré, the president of Burkina Faso, in 2002. According to Bourgi, Compaoré arrived in Paris with several djembe drums, the traditional West African percussion instruments. But these were no ordinary drums. Hidden inside beneath the animal skins and wooden frames were stacks of euro bills. The money, Bourgi claimed, was destined for Chirac's re-election campaign. This anecdote, whether true or embellished, perfectly illustrated the brazen nature of the alleged financial ties between France and its former colonies. Section 7. The price of allegiance. The secret financial ties between France and Africa, as revealed by Robert Bourgi and others, had a corrosive effect on both sides. In Africa, these arrangements propped up corrupt dictators, discouraging good governance and accountability. The flow of cash from African treasuries to French politicians deprived African citizens of vital resources that could have been used for education, healthcare, and infrastructure. In France, the acceptance of these illicit funds undermined public trust in the political system. It also tarnished France's image abroad, reinforcing perceptions of neocolonialism and exploitation. Section 8. A system under scrutiny. Bourgi's revelations, along with investigations by journalists and anti-corruption groups, brought the shadowy world of Françafrique under unprecedented scrutiny. In 2010, a French court launched an investigation into allegations of embezzlement and corruption involving Omar Bongo and other African leaders. While the investigation was initially met with resistance, it marked a turning point in France's relationship with its former colonies. The era of impunity, it seemed, was coming to an end. Section 9. Calls for transparency. The revelations about France's secret financial ties with Africa sparked calls for greater transparency and accountability. Civil society organizations in both France and Africa demanded an end to the culture of secrecy and impunity that had characterized Françafrique for decades. They called for investigations into past wrongdoing, the repatriation of stolen assets, and a new era of transparency in Franco-African relations. The challenge was to move beyond the rhetoric of reform and towards concrete action. Section 10. The future of Franco-African relations. The revelations about France's secret financial ties with Africa marked a turning point in the relationship between the former colonial power and its former colonies. The old system of patronage and kickbacks, known as Françafrique, was no longer tenable in an era of increased scrutiny and accountability. The challenge for France was to forge a new relationship with Africa, one based on mutual respect, transparency, and shared prosperity. This would require a fundamental shift in mindset, a move away from the paternalistic and exploitative practices of the past. It would also require a commitment to addressing the legacy of Françafrique, including the issue of stolen assets and the need for greater economic justice.